We want to thank you for your giving, because your giving enables us to do so much. Minister not only here in our church and in our local community, but also ministering overseas in Africa, Spain, and a lot of different places that we're able to invest and to minister. And it's your giving that enables us to do that, so thank you. This morning we celebrate 12 years as a faith community, as a community of believers here. And what I usually do on this Sunday is just kind of share the vision of who we are and what we're about and why we do what we do. It was 1998, I went to a leadership summit in Chicago and was at this 2-day conference, and I went to just learn some leadership stuff. Little did I know that God would change the course and the direction of my life at this conference. As I went, God gave me a vision, gave me a passion to see a church that did church a little bit different than just a traditional church or normal church. So I began to see a church that had a focus of reaching people who were outside of the walls of the church and made it so that people outside would feel comfortable coming inside. And this vision, this mission really that God put in my heart just began to build and began to burn. Needless to say, I left Chicago that day, and when I came home, there was something that had changed inside of me. Shortly after that, a couple of years later, went back to the same church and the same conference, and Matt and Lori Williams had traveled with us to go up there, and the same thing, I think it happened in their heart and life as well as what had happened in mine. I remember us flying back from Chicago to Atlanta, and on the plane home, we were just kind of dreaming out loud of what would it be like if there was a church that really focused on the people who are outside of the walls and a place that people would feel comfortable coming and hear a relevant, practical message, and that we could just try to connect them with God somehow and let God do what God does best. What if there was a church that really took serious the great commandment that God gave us, so serious that we would structure our church, our services around that idea, that we'd try to remove the obstacles that had kept people away from church for so long, that we would welcome people regardless of where they were on their spiritual journey, whether they were Christ followers or whether they didn't even claim to know Christ, that we would welcome the people in, no matter their social status, their financial situation, didn't matter what race, their color they were, whether they were raised in church or whether they'd never been to church. A place that would take the churchiness out of church and that was just simply real and relevant and understandable. A place to connect people to God and to connect people with each other. A place to belong. On August 14, 2004, we met with a small group, 18 people, in our living room, and I cast that vision to them of what if there was a church like this? And for the next 3 weeks, we did this vision cast in our living room at our home. And finally, on September 14th or September 12th of 2004, we launched our first public service at the Chamber of Commerce downtown. We met there for 3 weeks. We moved to the City Auditorium for 16 months. And then we were able to acquire this land and build this building, which is a whole other story for another time, a God thing. And the rest has been history, as they say. The rest has been an incredible journey of what God has done in us and through us and what He's done through this church and through you and how lives have been changed over the past 12 years. I'll never forget a story of a wife came to me after one of the services and she said, I've waited 40 years for my husband to come to church with me, and he's coming now. He loves it. A story of a person in their late 70s who came down after a service one Sunday and said, I need Christ, and prayed for the very first time in their life to receive Christ into their lives. I remember our very first service, there was a couple who had never gone to church, and someone invited them to come for that Sunday, and they sent me an email on Monday morning, and they said, this might just be the church that gets us to church. There was story after story. This past couple of weeks ago, we celebrated baptism and people's lives who have been changed, people who are following through with baptism. I remember about 3 Sundays ago, a man stopped me in the lobby before he left with tears coming out of his eyes, and he said, I hadn't been to church in a long time, and he said, I felt something today when I came that I've never felt before. He's been coming ever since. We're simply striving to do what Jesus asked us all to do. That's been our mission and our vision from day one, is to simply reach the world, reach our community with the love of God. This is what Jesus said. Matthew chapter 9, and you can read along on the screens with us this morning. Matthew 9, beginning in verse 35. Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. And then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into the fields. Jesus not only gave a great commission, but he demonstrated it with his own life. Notice the words here in the very first verse that we read. He said, Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in the synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom, and healing sicknesses and diseases. Jesus went. Jesus would go where the people were. It's so interesting. I read this passage out of a book that I read not long ago. Leighton Ford, he said this: it indicates that North America now holds the distinct honor of being the third largest mission field in the English-speaking world. And the U.S. has more secular, unchurched people than most of the nations of the world, yet many churches don't seem to operate in light of that fact. Jesus went where the people were. He wasn't waiting on them to come to him. Yes, he would teach in the temple and he would preach in the synagogues, but that mostly what he did was go out into the community and the villages and the cities, and he would interact with people and he would minister to the people and meet their needs. And after he had healed the sick and he had fed the hungry and he had served the broken and he had comforted those who were hurting, then people would flock to hear what this man had to say. In fact, Jesus said, I've come to seek and to save those that are lost. I've come to seek and to save. Seek means that you go out and you look for something. To seek means that you've got to move from where you're at and you have to go out in a certain direction and look for something. And Jesus said, I've come to go. I've come to seek and to save those that are lost. It implied that he didn't sit around in the synagogue all day or in the temple all day and wait for people to come to him. He didn't say, hey, if you want some good news, I'll be here between 10 and 12 every day right here speaking, and you can come hear me speak if you want to hear some good news. No, he took the good news to where the people were. He didn't just preach good news. He went out and demonstrated the good news. Verse 36, when he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. A few key words in this verse here. He said he saw people. He saw people. He really noticed people. How many of you have ever been in a crowd before, just a crowd of people, and felt like nobody even saw you? You ever had that experience before? And how often have we been in a crowd and never noticed the people around us? But it says here, when he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them. Something that always intrigued me about Jesus and following his story through the Gospels is he not only went to where the people were, when he actually went through the day, he looked for people in need of love and acts of kindness and people who could use some good news. He didn't go through the day focused on his to-do list and focused on his appointments and focused on how busy he was and how he had to do this and that. He had time for people. He stopped and noticed the people around him, and he had compassion for them. He saw a woman drawing water at a well one day, and he stops and engages this woman in conversation and leads her into a relationship with him. He sees a grieving widow one day on the way to bury her only son. He saw a crooked tax collector who had climbed up in a tree in a crowd one day, and he stopped and engaged this little tax collector. He saw a woman being humiliated in the streets and her sins put on public display in the city square. But he saw her and he stopped. He saw fishermen who were frustrated after a night of all-night fishing and not getting a single bite. He saw them as they were washing their nets, and he stopped and engaged them. He saw a widow who was giving her last 2 cents in the offering in the temple. He saw a father who was concerned over his mentally handicapped son. You see, here's the thing. Jesus didn't see people as an interruption to his ministry. He saw people as his ministry. Why he came, why he was here. He walked slowly through the crowds and he noticed people. And he didn't just notice them or see them. He said he had compassion on them and he loved them. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm guilty of intentionally not seeing people. I'll go into a store and there'll be people out, especially if they've got the blood truck out there. You know what I'm talking about? The give blood, and they'll usually have people standing out there, and if they're at this entrance, I go around to the other entrance. I know that's bad. I'm a minister, I'm a preacher. I know you've never done that before. When they're standing out there with buckets to collect money, sometimes I just intentionally, like I'm hurrying by and looking at my phone or a list and try to get in and just intentionally not notice people. I know no one in this room's ever done that, so I'm the only one. Because if I see them, I'm going to feel obligated, and then I'm going to feel guilty if I don't do something. I know no one else in the room has done this either. You see somebody on the curb with a sign, need food, need gas money. And they're over here, and we're like, oh, look at that car. Man, I love that. You know, oh, yeah. And we intentionally turn away from people. That's why I want to be a little more like my daughter. She has a tender heart for that, and she gets on me a lot of times when I intentionally don't see people. But you see, it's not just people with signs in the parking lots that we often intentionally ignore, but what about the people you work with? What about the people you go to school with? What about the waitress that will serve you or waiter that's going to serve you? What about the people in the gym that you work out in or the ball fields that you hang out at? Or what about the people at CrossFit or the grocery store or the gas stations? Do I walk into these places with eyes wide open? Do I really see the people that are there and people that are in need of God's love and acts of kindness that I could serve them in His name? When I see the crowds, am I moved with compassion or annoyance? Jesus showed us an example. He went into the streets and He loved people and met their needs. And He said, now let me give you the instruction in verse 37. And then He said to His disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into the harvest field. There's a lot more implied in this verse than just reading it at face value. He said, ask the Lord of the harvest to send laborers. And what He's implying here is you can be the answer to your own prayer. It's, oh, God, I hope somebody will stop and take care of them. I hope somebody will give to them. I hope somebody will serve them. And Jesus said, you pray that the Lord will send you to do that. You be the answer to someone's prayer, to someone's need. He said, pray the Lord of the harvest that He would send somebody, and let it start with you. Stop and notice them and love them. And then He says this, now you go. You go where the people are. You love on the people. You serve the people in my name. Jesus instructed His followers to go out into the field and look around. Jesus' mission was very simple. It was not complicated. He defined it down in just a few words. He said, I've come to seek and to save lost people. And then He told us, He said, you go out into the fields and you look for lost people. You look around when you get out in the field. And He said, if they're hungry, feed them. If they're thirsty, give them something to drink. If they need clothes, put clothes on their back. If they need comforting, wrap your arms around them. If they need care for specific needs, you be the answer to that need. To love and to serve and to do all of this stuff in the name of SouthPoint Church. No. He said, do all of these things in my name. You serve them because you love me. See, we have to be careful to keep our focus outside the walls of this building. Because if we're not careful, our natural tendency is to focus on ourselves, on our needs, on our programs, on our perks as members. And we can easily become an exclusive club that those outside of these walls find very hard and difficult to fit inside the walls. We can easily get caught up in doing church that we forget to be the church. That we forget it's not about gathering and huddling up on Sundays, but it's about going out on Mondays through Saturdays and being the church. We'll forget the lost and hurting people that are outside of these walls. Jesus' instructions, they were very clear. He said, go into the fields. Go into all the world. Another passage says he told us to go into all the world. Chapter 10 of this Matthew chapter 9 here, on beginning in verse 1, he said this. He gathered his disciples around him, his followers, and he said, now I'm going to send you out to go out into the villages and the cities and the surrounding areas to do the work of my kingdom. And so often we like to, especially in the South, we kind of twist that translation around. Instead of him saying, you go out and serve, we say, y'all come. Y'all come. You know, we're here. Y'all come. It's much easier to sit in the comfort of a barn than to go out into the field and do the work in the field. And if we're not careful, we'll sit inside our houses of worship and we'll worship our God and sing our songs, waiting for people to come to us. And it's not about getting people to come to church. It's about getting people introduced to Jesus. I told someone this week, I said, I never thought I'd ever get up and you'd hear me say, it's not about you bringing people into this church. We want that, yes, but that's not what it's about. It's about you introducing the people in your circles to Jesus. What kind of impact could this community and could this church have if we took literally the words of Jesus to go into our world and make a difference? What could happen if we seriously did that? What if instead of sitting in the comfort of our building and saying, hey, we start church at 10:45 on Sunday, hope y'all will join us. What if we actually left the building today and we went out into our communities and neighborhoods determined to take Christ to those that we work with, those that we go to school with, those that we live next door to? What if we actually went out tomorrow and determined to make Christ known through acts of kindness and acts of love? And instead of hanging out by the water cooler or the break room to get the latest, what if we hung out at the water cooler or the break room to listen for needs and to spot people who could use some encouragement or someone that we could minister to? Why don't we do that? What if we left today and went out into the worlds that God has placed us in, determined not to make a point? Well, you just need God. Or you just need to go to church, or you just need to straighten up and get your act cleaned up, and then you need to come and get your tail set down on a seat and be in church like the rest of us. Instead of going out trying to make a point, what would happen if we determined to just go out and try to make a difference? To notice people, to find needs, to make a difference wherever we are, to serve others in the name of Christ, not in the name of our church or the name of our religion. What if we literally went into the world as Jesus instructed us and made a difference wherever we were daily, starting in our homes? What if we left here today and said, you know, I'm determined to go home and make a difference in my home, in my family, with my kids, with my spouse, and I'm determined to make a difference where I live? What if we left here determined that we'll go to work Monday morning with a simple mission of identifying needs and making a difference in people's lives? Well, you don't know the policies where I work. I mean, they're very strict about that kind of stuff. You don't know the people that I work with. The only difference I'd really like to make when I get to work on Monday is to rearrange the people I work with, make a difference in who's going to be there, and get rid of some and bring in some others. Here's what I can tell you and guarantee you about the place that you work, whether it's big or small. You can take this to the bank. I guarantee you at the place that you work, there's someone in need. There's someone who's hurting. There's someone who's confused and trying to make a decision in their life. There's someone who's lost. We're not trying to promote our church. We're trying to promote Jesus to them. What about at school? What about tomorrow at school? Well, I'll look ridiculous, if I go in there and start this whole Jesus thing and love, and, I'll look really foolish if I go into the school. And besides, strict policies at school. Can't talk about God. Can't talk about church. We're not talking about God or church, but we're simply looking for needs and loving people and serving people. And what I found, that people may resist your God and they may resist your church, but people are very open to those who sincerely care about them and want to help them. What about the grocery store? What about the gas pumps? What about the convenience store, or the restaurant, or what about the gym or the ball fields or the waiting rooms? Determined to make a difference. I love one of the ladies here in our church started a group for ladies. It's not a churchy thing. It's just, it's called Lift, Ladies in Fellowship Together, and she hosts it in her home. She's doing something to make a difference in the lives of some ladies, some parents, single parents, or parents with small children, and she's doing something to make a difference in their life. I shared a little bit this morning with our worship team that I had a day this past week, busy day. It was a busy week, busy day, and long day, and was wrapping up the day, was in a meeting, and as soon as the meeting was over, I was out of here. I was ready to go. I didn't want to see anybody. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I was just ready to go home. You ever had those kind of days? And I was ready to leave, and Jeanette came in my office. She said, there's a young man or man out in the lobby that wants to see you. And I did the preacherly thing. I was like smiling, and I was going, oh, great. I don't want to be here. I want to go home. And I said, well, give me 10 minutes, and I went out in the lobby, and it was a former student of mine from youth ministry days. Hadn't seen him in probably 20 years. And he came in, and he said, hey, can we talk just a minute? I said, sure, come on in. And we sat down and we started talking. And he was catching me up on his life, what all was going on. And he said, I just wanted to come by and say thank you. And I was like, what? And he said, just wanted to come by and say thank you. He said, I remember the lessons that you taught, and I remember the times that we spent together. And he said, I never forgot those. And he said, now I've got a family of 6. He's married, got 6 children. He's an assistant principal. He coaches sports. He's done band with 160 students. And he said, I'm trying to instill in them the things that you instilled in me. And as he left that day, and I was thinking about today, I thought, you never know the simple acts of kindness and service that you do where you work, in your school, or on the job, at home, wherever. You never know the ripple effect of that. If we simply just took the time to stop and notice people and invested in people. You see, here's what Jesus knew, and I think we have to realize is when you go outside of the walls and into the fields, not with religion or promoting our church, but you simply leave these walls and you go out into your world and your places of work and school, whatever, and you're simply looking for needs and meeting them in Jesus' name, then we'll never have to invite another person to come to church with us. You know why? Because if we're serving and loving on people, they're going to follow you back. They will follow you here. Jesus' instructions was not to get people to come to church. He said, you go be the church to a lost and hurting world. Church was never intended to be a resting place. Oh, well, we're just happy with church. Church was meant to be a sending place where we gather and we prepare and we pray and we worship and celebrate together, and then we go out into the world and we make a difference. When I think about the possibilities of what God could do through a group of people who are determined to go out into their world and to simply make a difference in His name, it ignites something inside of me. It puts a smile, I think, on the face of God. When I look at our local community and I realize that there are people in our community who have never gone to church, and you go, oh, but this is the Bible Belt, and this is small town Eufaula, and we've got churches on every corner. But believe me, there are people in our community who have never gone to church, and I've seen them come in these doors, and I've talked to them before. There's people who've never gone to church. They have no idea who Christ is and how much He loves them and cares for them. There are children right here in our community that are going hungry. There are single parents who are struggling. There are widows who are lost and afraid. There are students who are struggling to find their identity and to fit in. There are marriages that are disintegrating and families that are falling apart. There are people who are confused over their sexual orientation. There's people who are struggling with forgiveness and they're consumed with bitterness. There are those that are battling with addictions of alcohol and drugs and pornography and anger and depression and a host of other things. There are people that have bought into religion and they have no idea that there is a relationship to be had with a loving, caring God. When I see all this, it doesn't depress me and it doesn't want to make me give up. It does something to my heart. It makes it beat a little faster. It reaffirms the mission God gave His followers and the mission of this church to reach out and connect people to a loving, caring God who really cares about them and values them. It reminds me that, yes, we celebrate 12 years, but there's so much more work that needs to be done. It reminds me that the church is the hope of the world, not the building and the structure, but the people. The people, God's people, are the hope of the world. That God wants to invade this community and this world with His love and His light and touch this world through His body, through you and through me. It reminds me that every weekend service, every student event, every children's event, every small group, every fellowship, every dinner, every work day, that they're all huge. It reminds me that every person that walks through these doors is valuable to God and they better be valuable to us. It reminds me that everything that we do, every person who serves is important. Every person who serves plays a vital role in God's redemptive plan for humanity. No wonder Jesus told His followers on another occasion in John 4:35, He said, "Do not say 4 months more and then the harvest." I said, I tell you, open your eyes and look at the fields. They're ripe for harvest. What He was saying, don't sit around and talk about it. Don't sit around and say, one of these days I'm going to really try to make a difference. And somebody, they said, don't just put it off. You don't even have to pray about it. Well, I'm praying about, doing. You don't have to pray about this. He's already told us to do it. So we just serve in His name. There's endless opportunities, and they're all around us to serve the poor, to encourage the brokenhearted, to offer hope to the hopeless, to touch a lost and hurting community. Jesus called us to go into the darkness and shine. Jesus said, you are the salt. You are the light. You're the difference makers. You're the influencers. Our good works are to be done outside the walls of this church so that others will see the love of God in action and see His goodness in our life. So I challenge you to go and engage. Go and engage your neighbors. Go and engage your coworkers. Go and engage your friends. Go engage your classmates. Go and engage family members. Majority of people attending this church today are here because someone stopped and noticed them and engaged them, built a relationship with them, and brought them in. You already have people in your life right now that you've invested in and that you have a relationship with, and they're just waiting for someone to come along and gather them in. That person is you. It's you. Jesus said, look, the fields are ready. They're ripe. The problem isn't with the crop. The problem is with those who will go out and gather the crop. Farmer can't harvest his crop sitting in the house, looking out the window and going, man, that's a nice crop out there. I sure hope that crop just gets up and comes in the barn and bundles itself. No, the farmer has to get up and actually get in the field and do the work. But the payoff is huge. The heart of SouthPoint Church is people matter to God. And they better matter to us. This church was birthed with that vision, that mission. The Great Commission. It's who we are. It's what we do. It's a mission that we take very seriously. I'll never forget the first week that we launched the church. I sat down at lunch from a guy, and he sat across the table from me, and he said, this is something that I think I could give my life for. This is something that I think I could be totally in for life. Count me in. It's committed to a cause. I'm committed to this cause. I'm committed to what we're doing in this great commission. I'm committed to it until the day I die or until the day that God says, I'm through with you. As are many in this room this morning who are committed. That's the reason they're here today. That's the reason they serve week after week. You see, this is not Chris's church. Thank God. It's not Chris's church. It's not about me. It's about him. It's not about my kingdom. It's about his kingdom. It's not about getting a blessing. It's about being a blessing. It's not about getting fed. It's about feeding others. It's not about being served, but serving others and loving others in the name of the one who gave us all for us. It's a cause bigger than ourselves and of eternal consequences. And God has called us to partner with him in accomplishing his work. So my challenge this morning, after 12 years, is simply this. Go. Go. Go in your neighborhood. Go to your school. Go where you work. Go to the ball fields. Go to the gyms. Go to the places that you normally go, but go there with the purpose of making a difference and serving others in the name of Christ. We're going to have communion in just a moment. Y'all can go ahead and come up. But before we do that, I want to pray a prayer over you. It's one that I pray often. I've got it in my journals, and I move it from journal to journal. When I get through one, I put it in the next one. But it's a prayer that keeps me focused, and it's really a prayer that describes my heart. And I'd like to pray this prayer over you, and then we'll get ready for communion. Let me pray for you. God, this is a new day. I freshly commit myself to the role that you've invited me to play as you're building your church in this world. I'm awestruck again today that you would include me in this grand, life-giving, world-transforming endeavor. So today, this day, I joyfully offer you my love, my heart, my talents, my energy, my creativity, my faithfulness, my resources, and my gratitude. I commit myself to the role that you have assigned me in the building of your church so that it may thrive in this world. And I will bring it today. I'll bring my best. You deserve it. Our community deserves it. The church deserves it. It's the hope of the world. They're going to